The stars looked different from up here. Commander Day stood at the observation window of the Perseverance, watching the massive station that orbited a dead star. The Galactic Council chamber was bigger than anything humans had ever built. It was made of crystal and metal that shimmered like ice under strange lights. 47 different species lived and worked together in that station. Day found it hard to believe. Behind him, Dr. Hana was checking her translation device for the 100th time. She was nervous. They all were. This was humanity's first meeting with alien civilizations, and everything had to go perfectly. Ambassador Sora sat quietly in her chair, reading through her prepared speech. She had spent months writing it, changing every word until it sounded just right. Pilot Quan was the only one who seemed relaxed. He leaned against the wall, tossing a small metal ball up and catching it. The young pilot had seen the station's defense systems when they arrived. He thought they were old and weak, but he kept that opinion to himself. For now, a light blinked on the console. It was time. The four humans walked through the airlock and into the council chamber. The room was enormous. Hundreds of beings sat in curved rows that rose up like an ancient amphitheater. Some looked almost human. Others were so strange that Day had trouble understanding what he was seeing. There were creatures made of light, beings that floated in tanks of colored liquid, and things that seemed to be made of living crystal. At the center of the chamber stood High Arbiter Velshara. She was one of the Lumini, a being of pure crystalline structure that refracted light into rainbow patterns. When she spoke, her voice came from everywhere at once, translated instantly into a language the humans could understand. Welcome, humans of Earth. You stand before the Galactic Council, a union of civilized species that has maintained peace for 10,000 years. We have reviewed your application for membership. We have also reviewed your history. The chamber's walls suddenly filled with images. Day recognized them immediately. They were scenes from Earth's past. Wars, nuclear explosions, cities burning, refugees fleeing from destruction. The images showed humanity at its worst, all the violence and cruelty that had marked their history. Ambassador Sora stepped forward. Her voice was calm and clear. Yes, our past was violent. We do not deny it. But we have learned from our mistakes. Earth has been at peace for 3 generations. We have ended poverty, cured diseases, and united our world. We have grown beyond our violent nature. A voice interrupted her. It was harsh and filled with mockery. Grown beyond violence. You still train soldiers. You still build weapons. You still prepare for war. The speaker was General Kreth of the Vryn Empire. The Vryn were tall, covered in dark scales with eyes that glowed red. They were warriors, but they followed the council's rules. Mostly. Kreth pointed one clawed finger at Commander Day. That one wears the scars of battle. He commands war machines. How can you claim peace when you still worship violence? Day felt his jaw tighten. The scar on his face, a gift from the Mars Rebellion, began to ache the way it always did when he was angry. But he said nothing. This was Sora's mission, not his. Sora spoke again. We maintain defense forces because we are cautious, not because we seek conflict. Commander Day is here because he understands the cost of war better than anyone. He fights so that others will never have to. Kreth laughed. It was an ugly sound. Pretty words. But I wonder if your warrior is as strong as you claim. The Vryn have a tradition. When we meet a new species, we test their strength through combat. I challenge this Commander Day to face me in the ritual arena. High Arbiter Velshara's light flickered in what might have been disapproval. General Kreth, such challenges are not appropriate for council proceedings. The humans are here as guests. I accept, Day said. His voice cut through the chamber like a knife. Sora turned to him, shock clear on her face. Commander, you cannot— He insulted Earth, Day said quietly. He called us weak. If I refuse, every species in this chamber will believe him. We came here asking for respect. Sometimes respect has to be earned. The arena was small, surrounded by force fields that would contain the fight. Kreth entered first, carrying a weapon that looked like a combination of a spear and an axe. He moved with confidence, spinning the weapon casually. He had done this many times before. Day entered with nothing but his combat training and a simple metal rod, the only weapon he was allowed. He had fought hand-to-hand before during the dark days on Mars. He had learned that size and strength meant less than speed and thinking. The fight began. Kreth moved fast, his weapon whistling through the air. Day dodged barely. The Vryn was strong and experienced. But he was also predictable. He fought with honor, following patterns and rules. Humans did not always fight with honor. They fought to survive. Day waited, watching Kreth's patterns. When the Vryn general made his next attack, Day did something unexpected. He threw his metal rod at Kreth's feet. The general stumbled, and in that moment Day was inside his guard. A strike to the throat, a knee to the leg, a twist that sent the weapon flying. Kreth fell hard. Day stood over him, breathing heavily, his hand raised for the final strike that would end the general's life. The chamber was silent. Every being watched, waiting to see what the human would do. Day lowered his hand. "The fight is over," he said. "I have no reason to kill you." He walked away, leaving Kreth alive but humiliated. The Vryn general's eyes burned with hatred as he was helped to his feet. That evening, the council voted. Humanity was granted provisional membership with restrictions. No military vessels beyond their home system. No weapons research without council approval. Ambassador Sora called it a victory. Dr. Hana was not so sure. Later, as the human delegation toured the station, Quan pulled Dr. Hana aside. He pointed to the defensive systems built into the station's walls. "Look at this," he said quietly. "These defenses are ancient. They are designed for show, not for real fighting. These people have not had a real war in thousands of years." "That is a good thing," Hana said. "Peace should be celebrated." "Maybe," Quan replied. "But it also means they do not understand what we had to survive to get here. They do not understand what humans are capable of when pushed." That night, alarms screamed through the Perseverance. Someone had broken into the ship's computer systems. They had stolen classified files, including military defense plans for Earth. The security footage showed Vryn soldiers. By morning, the Vryn Empire had fled Council space. They had taken a copy of Earth's coordinates, its defense networks, and every weakness in humanity's armor. High Arbiter Velshara received a message from General Kreth. It was simple and direct. "The Vryn Empire declares war on the human species. We will show the galaxy what happens to primitives who dare to humiliate us. Earth will burn." Commander Day stood at the window again, looking out at the stars. Somewhere out there, an enemy fleet was preparing to destroy his home. He had shown mercy to Kreth, and this was the result. He would not make that mistake again. 6 months had passed since the theft. 6 months of preparation and fear. The Vryn Armada appeared at the edge of the solar system like a dark cloud blocking out the stars. 300 warships, each one larger and more powerful than anything Earth had ever built. Commander Day was now Fleet Admiral Day, promoted in humanity's desperate rush to prepare for war. He stood on the bridge of the warship Defiance, watching the enemy fleet approach. Earth's defense force consisted of 45 ships. They were patrol vessels designed to stop pirates and asteroids, not to fight an interstellar war. Dr. Hana worked in the ship's laboratory, her eyes red from lack of sleep. She had been studying the stolen Vryn technology, looking for any weakness, and she had found one. The Vryn shields were powerful, designed to absorb steady energy weapons, but they could not handle rapid changes in frequency. It was a small weakness, but it was something. Ambassador Sora had argued for surrender. The Galactic Council had sent observers, but they would not help. They said Earth was still only a provisional member. They could not interfere. High Arbiter Velshara had sent a private message to Sora, urging her to accept defeat. The Vryn would enslave humanity, but at least humans would survive. Day had refused. "Our history taught us what happens when we surrender to tyrants," he told the Council's observers. "We might die fighting, but we will die free." The first battle began near Jupiter. The Vryn fleet moved in perfect formation, their ships gleaming with energy shields. They fired their weapons with precision, targeting Earth's ships one by one. It was like watching a machine work, efficient and emotionless. 20 human ships were destroyed in the first 10 minutes. The explosions lit up space like dying stars. The Council observers watched in silence. This was a massacre, not a battle. Earth would fall within hours. Then Pilot Quan did something that no Vryn expected. He led his squadron of small fighters directly into a field of debris from the destroyed ships. The Vryn sensors lost track of the fighters in the chaos of metal and radiation. When the fighters emerged, they were behind the Vryn flagship. Quan's missiles had been modified based on Dr. Hana's research. They changed their energy frequency 1,000 times per second. The Vryn shields flickered and failed. The flagship's engines exploded, and the massive ship began to drift, powerless. For the first time in the battle, the Vryn formation broke. Ships turned to protect their damaged flagship, creating gaps in their perfect lines. Admiral Day saw his chance. All ships attack pattern Delta. Target the gaps. Use the debris as cover. What followed was not the organized battle the Vryn expected. Human ships darted between asteroids and wreckage, firing and then hiding. They used Jupiter's moons for cover, emerging to strike and then vanishing again. The Vryn had superior weapons and shields, but they could not hit enemies they could not predict. The Council observers were shocked. This was not how civilized species fought wars. This was chaos. This was trickery. One observer whispered to another, "They fight like animals without honor." Admiral Day heard the comment through the open communications channel. He did not bother to respond. Honor meant nothing when your home was about to be destroyed. Survival was all that mattered. The battle lasted 3 days. Earth lost 30 ships in total. But the Vryn lost 60. They retreated to regroup, confused and angry. This was not supposed to happen. Primitive species did not win battles against the Vryn Empire. General Kreth called for a ceasefire to discuss terms. Ambassador Sora wanted to accept. "We hurt them badly," she argued. "Maybe now they will agree to peace." But Dr. Hana had intercepted Vryn communications. "It's a trick," she said, showing them the decoded messages. "They are calling for reinforcements. They want us to lower our guard while they bring more ships." Day made a decision that would haunt him forever. He ordered the remaining human ships to retreat to Mars, and he left behind a surprise. Scattered throughout the asteroid belt were hundreds of small devices. They looked like normal mining charges, the kind used to break apart asteroids. But these were not mining charges. They were nuclear weapons, old and dirty, the kind Earth had banned centuries ago. The kind that civilized species never used. When the Vryn fleet pursued the human ships into the asteroid belt, Day gave the order. The mines detonated in a massive chain reaction. The explosions tore through the Vryn formation, destroying 80 ships in seconds. The remaining Vryn vessels fled in panic. The Council observers immediately broadcast their outrage. Nuclear weapons were forbidden by galactic law. Traps were considered dishonorable. Admiral Day had violated every rule of civilized warfare. Dr. Hana responded with her own broadcast. She showed images of Vryn attacks on human colony stations, civilian ships destroyed, prisoners tortured for information, children killed in orbital bombardments. "You call us barbaric for our weapons," she said, her voice shaking with rage. "But at least we learned from our violent past. The Vryn have never known consequence. They thought we would be easy prey." The galaxy watched the images in silence. Some species began to question whether the humans were the real problem, or if the Vryn had started a war they did not understand. General Kreth survived the nuclear trap, but his pride did not. He had started this war to punish humanity for humiliating him. Now his empire had lost half its fleet to a species the Council called primitive. The shame burned worse than any physical wound. He sent a message to his remaining ships. "No more honorable combat. No more mercy. We will destroy Earth completely. Every human city, every orbital station, every ship. We will burn their world until nothing remains but ash and memory." The Vryn fleet, now numbering 150 ships, regrouped and began their final approach to Earth. Admiral Day watched them come. His forces were down to 15 operational warships. The defense satellites around Earth were powerful, but they would not be enough. Ambassador Sora came to the bridge. She looked older than her years, worn down by months of war and death. "There is one option left," she said quietly. Dr. Hana found something in the data Quan brought back from the Vryn flagship. Day looked at the information. It was coordinates to the Vryn homeworld, Krathor, and more importantly, it showed the location of their planetary defense system, a massive antimatter platform that could destroy entire fleets. It was the reason no one had ever successfully attacked the Vryn homeworld. "If we could reach it," Hana explained, "we might be able to hack the system." The Vryn never expected anyone to get close enough to try. "Their security is strong but old. It would be a suicide mission," Day said. "Krathor is 8 light years away, deep in Vryn space. Even if we got there, we would never get back." Pilot Quan appeared in the doorway. "Then it is good that I volunteered," he said with his usual reckless smile. "Someone has to teach the Vryn that humans can reach anywhere, even places they think are safe." Admiral Day wanted to refuse. Quan was too young, too valuable, but he saw the determination in the young pilot's eyes. Quan understood what was at stake. If Earth fell, humanity died. And if humanity had to die, they would make sure the Vryn paid a price that would be remembered for 10,000 years. Pilot Quan's ship was a captured Vryn vessel, modified and repaired by human engineers. It still had Vryn identification codes, which meant it could travel through enemy space without immediately being attacked. With him were 5 other volunteers, all engineers and computer specialists. Dr. Hana had trained them personally on Vryn systems. The journey to Krathor took 12 days. Every hour they expected to be discovered. Every time a Vryn patrol ship passed nearby, they held their breath and hoped their false codes would hold. Somehow they were never caught. Maybe they were lucky. Maybe the Vryn were too focused on Earth to notice one small ship. Back at Earth, Admiral Day prepared for the final battle. The Vryn fleet had arrived in orbit, 150 warships positioned around the planet like a closing fist. General Kreth broadcast his demands: surrender immediately, or watch Earth burn. Ambassador Sora stood on the bridge of the Perseverance, which was now being used to evacuate civilians. She had argued for peace so many times. She had believed that words could solve any problem. But she had been wrong. Some enemies only understood one language. Admiral, Sora said quietly, I want to join the defense line. Dee looked at her in surprise. The Perseverance is an evacuation ship. It has no weapons. Then we will ram them if we have to, Sora replied. I have spent my life negotiating with monsters. I understand now that the only thing they respect is resolve. If Earth falls, I fall with it. The battle began at dawn, though in space there was no real dawn. The Vryn opened fire with everything they had. Earth's defense satellites returned fire, creating a wall of energy and metal between the enemy and the planet below. Human ships darted through the chaos, targeting Vryn vessels with modified weapons, but the numbers were too great. For every Vryn ship damaged, 2 more took its place. The defense satellites began to fail, overheating from constant use. Earth's cities prepared for bombardment. Billions of people looked up at the sky, knowing death was coming. At Krathor, Quan's team reached the antimatter platform. It was bigger than they had imagined, a structure the size of a city floating in orbit above the Vryn homeworld. Getting inside had been surprisingly easy. The Vryn had never expected anyone to try. Dr. Hana guided them through the computer systems remotely, her voice crackling across 8 light-years of space. The platform is old, she said. It was built during the Vryn's own wars centuries ago. They never updated the security because they thought no one would ever get close. Quan and his team worked fast. They planted overload codes deep in the platform's systems. When activated, the antimatter containment would fail, creating an explosion visible across light years. But there was a problem. Someone had to stay behind to manually trigger the sequence. The remote activation had been damaged. Quan ordered his team back to the ship. They argued, but he pulled rank. Get back to Earth, he said. Tell them what we did here. Tell them humans can strike anywhere. As his team escaped, Quan activated the overload sequence. He had 3 minutes before the explosion. He spent those minutes recording a message. Not to his family, though he thought of them. Not to his commanders. His message was for the Vryn. This is Pilot Quan of Earth. You attacked my home. You killed my people. You thought we were weak because we asked for peace. You were wrong. This platform dies today. Your homeworld's defenses are gone. And if you touch Earth, we have the codes to hit Krathor from orbit. Stand down or we all burn together. The explosion lit up the Krathor system like a second sun. Every Vryn in the galaxy saw it. Their impenetrable defense, their ultimate weapon, destroyed by a handful of humans. The message reached General Kreth as his missiles were launching toward Earth's cities. He stopped, his clawed hand frozen over the controls. The human had to be bluffing. They could not possibly have hacked the platform's targeting systems. But what if they had? Dr. Hana saw Kreth's hesitation on her sensors. She immediately began broadcasting false signals, making it seem like human ships had control of the destroyed platform's weapon systems. It was a desperate lie. Quan had died in the explosion. There were no systems left to control. But Kreth did not know that. General Hana broadcast on all frequencies. We have your codes. We have your planet targeted. One signal from us and Krathor becomes a crater. Withdraw your fleet, or explain to your people why you chose revenge over their survival. The Vryn general's eyes glowed with rage. He had been tricked. These humans had infiltrated his homeworld, destroyed their defenses, and were now holding his planet hostage. Every instinct screamed at him to attack, to make Earth pay for this humiliation. But he hesitated. And in that moment of hesitation, something unexpected happened. The Galactic Council's peacekeeping fleet arrived. High Arbiter Velshara's ship appeared between the Vryn Armada and Earth, broadcasting on all channels. "This conflict ends now," Velshara declared. "The Council will enforce an immediate ceasefire. Both sides will stand down while we negotiate terms." General Kreth's rage finally broke free. "The Council has no authority here. This is Vryn justice." "You started an illegal war," Velshara replied calmly. "You attacked a Council member without authorization. If you do not withdraw immediately, the Vryn Empire will be expelled from the Council and sanctions will be imposed." For a long moment, no one moved. The Vryn fleet remained in position, weapons charged. The human ships, battered and outnumbered, prepared for one final stand. The Council peacekeepers waited, their powerful vessels creating a shield around Earth. Then General Kreth made his decision. Instead of withdrawing, he turned his flagship toward Earth's moon. His engines flared to full power, accelerating to ramming speed. He would destroy Luna, sending fragments into Earth that would slowly kill the planet over decades. If he could not have victory, he would have revenge. Admiral Day saw what was happening. There was only one ship big enough and fast enough to intercept Kreth, the Perseverance, but it was carrying 40,000 civilians, refugees fleeing the battle. To save Earth, he would have to sacrifice those who had already lost everything. Before Day could give the order, Ambassador Sora made the choice herself. She locked out all other controls on the Perseverance and set a collision course with Kreth's flagship. Her voice came over the communications channel, calm and clear. "All personnel evacuate to the escape pods immediately. That is a direct order." But the 40,000 civilians did not leave. Engineers rushed to help Sora control the massive ship. Teachers and farmers, people who had never seen combat, worked together to direct all power to the engines. They understood what she was doing. They chose to help. The Perseverance accelerated directly toward Kreth's flagship. Sora's last words were broadcast across every human channel. "Tell my children I remembered what we fight for. Tell the Council what humans are willing to do when there is no other choice." The collision created a new star in Earth's orbit. When the light faded, both ships were gone. 40,000 humans had sacrificed themselves to save 8 billion. The Vryn fleet, witnessing what humans were capable of, surrendered immediately. The war was over, but its echoes remained. The Vryn fleet withdrew to their territory, leaderless and broken. General Kreth was dead, along with Ambassador Sora and 40,000 brave humans. Earth mourned its dead while celebrating survival. The Galactic Council held an emergency session. Every species sent representatives. The chamber was filled with debate and argument. Some species demanded that humanity be expelled immediately. They pointed to the nuclear weapons, the suicide attacks, the destruction of the Vryn defense platform. These were not the actions of a civilized species. Admiral Day stood before the council. He looked older now, worn down by months of war. But his voice was steady and cold. "We warned you," he said. "We showed you our history. We told you about our wars and our scars. You chose to see us as primitive. The Vryn chose to see us as prey. Now you both understand the truth." High Arbiter Velshara's crystalline form seemed dimmer than before. "Admiral Day, your species violated every law of civilized warfare. You used weapons of mass destruction. You employed tactics that endangered your own people. You sacrificed thousands in suicide attacks. These actions cannot be ignored. You want to talk about laws?" Day's voice rose. "Where were your laws when the Vryn attacked our colonies? Where was the Council when they murdered our civilians? You watched and did nothing. You sent observers to record our deaths, but no ships to help us." "We could not intervene," Velshara replied. "You were only provisional members." "Then make us full members," Dr. Hana said, stepping forward. "Or expel us. But stop judging us for surviving when you were too afraid to help." The Council debated for 3 days. Some species argued that humanity was too dangerous to be allowed in civilized space. Others, who had witnessed human courage and sacrifice, argued something different. They proposed making humanity the Council's military force, the species you called when diplomacy failed. During the debate, Dr. Hana continued her research. She had been given access to the Council's ancient archives, records that went back thousands of years. What she found there terrified her. She burst into Admiral Day's quarters late one night, her eyes wide with fear. We need to call an emergency session, she said. Right now. An hour later, the council reconvened. Dr. Hana stood before them, displaying ancient documents on the chamber's screens. 8,000 years ago, the council faced a threat called the Devourers. They were a species that consumed entire solar systems, breaking down planets for resources. No one could defeat them in battle. The council members shifted uncomfortably. This was old history, deliberately forgotten. Velshara spoke quietly. The Devourers were sealed away in dark space in a prison designed to last forever. Why do you bring up this ancient history? Because the prison is failing, Hana said. She displayed recent sensor data. Long-range telescopes detected unusual energy signatures in the sealed zone. I analyzed them. The containment field is collapsing. The Devourers are breaking free. Silence filled the chamber. Then panic. Species representatives began shouting questions. How long until the Devourers reached council space? Could the containment be repaired? What defenses existed? Velshara raised her crystalline arms, calling for silence. Our projections showed the Devourers will reach the outer colonies in 5 years. They will reach Earth in 7. Our defensive strategy will be the same as before. Evacuate systems in their path and contain them through sacrifice. That is not a strategy, Admiral Day said flatly. That is surrender with extra steps. It is the only way, a council member argued. The Devourers cannot be defeated. They adapt to every weapon. They consume everything. 8,000 years ago, we lost 100 worlds trying to fight them. Only by sealing them away did we survive. Day looked around the chamber at all the different species. Some were brave, some were afraid. But none of them understood what he was about to propose. You fought them defensively, he said. You waited for them to come to you. That is why you lost. What are you suggesting? Velshara asked. We take the fight to them, Day said. We do not wait 7 years for them to reach us. We go to them now while they are still weak from containment. We hit them hard and we do not stop hitting them until they are destroyed. The council erupted in protests. Offensive warfare had been forbidden for 10,000 years. The council existed to keep peace, not to wage wars of aggression. What Day proposed was against everything they believed. Dr. Hana supported Day's plan. I studied the old record, she said. The species that imprisoned the Devourers did not win. They barely survived by running away. If we use the same strategy, we will get the same result. We need a different approach. The debate lasted for days. Finally, a vote was held. By a narrow margin, the council approved Admiral Day's plan. A combined fleet would be assembled. Council ships would provide firepower and shields. Human ships would provide tactics and weapons. Earth's shipyards worked day and night, building new vessels using both human and alien technology. The ships that emerged were unlike anything the galaxy had seen. They combined council energy weapons with human missile systems. They used alien shields alongside human armor. Each ship was a hybrid of 2 different philosophies of war. 3 months later, the fleet gathered. 200 council vessels and 85 human ships. The council ships were beautiful, designed with artistic curves and bright colors. The human ships were brutal and efficient, covered in weapons and painted dark gray. The contrast was not lost on anyone. One species fought to protect beauty and order. The other fought to survive at any cost. Admiral Day wondered if they could truly work together. He would find out soon enough. Dr. Hana had embedded herself with the fleet, serving as the chief science advisor. She studied everything the council knew about the Devourers. They were a hive mind, thousands of biomechanical ships controlled by a single intelligence. They consumed matter and energy, growing stronger with every system they destroyed. But there was something in the records that gave her hope. The Devourers were predators. They had evolved to hunt and consume, and predators, no matter how dangerous, relied on their prey behaving in predictable ways. Humans did not behave predictably. The fleet entered dark space, the region where the Devourers had been sealed away. Long-range sensors immediately detected activity. The containment field had collapsed completely. Already, Devourer ships were spreading out, heading toward the nearest stars. Admiral Day gave the order. All ships battle formation. Show them we are here. Make them come to us. The Devourers turned as one, sensing the fleet. Hundreds of bioships, each one pulsing with unnatural light, began moving toward them. They moved like a swarm of insects, coordinated and relentless. The first engagement began. The Council ships opened fire with their energy weapons, precise and controlled. The Devourers' adaptive shields absorbed the attacks, learning and adjusting within seconds. It was exactly as the old records described. The Devourers could adapt to any weapon given enough time. Then the human ships attacked. They did not use precision or control. They fired everything at once. Missiles, railguns, lasers, plasma weapons, kinetic projectiles. A storm of different attacks, each one using different physics, different frequencies, different approaches. The Devourers tried to adapt, but they could not adapt to chaos. By the time their shields learned to stop missiles, railgun rounds were tearing through their hulls. When they adapted to kinetic weapons, energy beams burned them. The human strategy was simple. Never give the enemy time to learn, but the Devourers were not easily stopped. For every ship destroyed, 3 more appeared. They swarmed around Council vessels, tearing them apart with crystalline claws and acid sprays. 80 Council ships were lost in the first hour. Admiral Day watched the battle unfold. The Council fleet was being destroyed. Their beautiful ships, designed for shows of force and peaceful deterrence, were no match for the brutal efficiency of the Devourers. He had to do something the enemy would never expect. He gave an order that made the Council observers question his sanity. All human ships activate Protocol Omega. Break formation, attack. The human ships broke formation and dove directly into the Devourer swarm. The Council observers thought it was suicide. They were wrong. It was something far more dangerous. It was humanity fighting without fear. Human vessels accelerated to maximum speed, charging straight at Devourer bioships that were 10 times their size. At the last second, they would fire everything and veer away. Sometimes they made it. Sometimes they did not. But even the ships that were destroyed took enemies with them. The Devourers paused. Their hive mind had never encountered this behavior. Prey did not attack like predators. Prey ran away. Prey tried to hide. These humans did neither. They fought with a fury that seemed almost suicidal. Dr. Hana watched from her position aboard the command ship. She suddenly understood what Admiral Day was doing. The Devourers had adapted to fight defensive species. They expected organized resistance, careful tactics, self-preservation. Humans offered none of that. They offered chaos and violence without limit. Admiral, Hana broadcast. The swarm is showing confusion in its coordination patterns. They have nodes that control communication between ships. If we can identify and destroy those nodes, the hive mind will fragment. Day immediately understood. He redirected all human ships to target the larger Devourer vessels, the ones that hung back from the main swarm. These were the coordination nodes, the brain of the hive. They were heavily protected, surrounded by smaller bioships. Getting to them would cost lives. Day knew this. Every pilot knew this. But they went anyway, because that is what humans did when there was no other choice. The battle became brutal. Human ships pushed through walls of enemy fire, their shields failing, their armor melting. Some pilots ejected at the last second. Others stayed with their ships until the end, making sure their final missile hit its target. A young captain named Minho commanded one of the smaller attack ships. He was only 23, fresh from the academy. His ship was damaged, leaking air and fuel. His weapons were nearly empty. But he saw a coordination node ahead, barely protected after other human ships had cleared the way. Minho armed his ship's nuclear warheads. These were meant to be launched, not detonated on board. But he had a different plan. He set a course directly for the coordination node, locked the controls, and recorded a final message. Mom, Dad, I am sorry I will not make it home, but I want you to know this was worth it. Tell everyone on Earth that we fought well out here. Tell them the Devourers learned what it means to face humanity. His ship struck the coordination node at full speed. The nuclear warheads detonated, creating a blast that consumed both vessels. Across the battlefield, a portion of the Devourer swarm suddenly lost coordination. Ships collided with each other. Attacks became random and unfocused. The Council fleet, seeing the confusion, pressed their advantage. Their energy weapons, once ineffective, now found vulnerable targets. Working together, human and alien ships tore through the disorganized swarm. But the largest coordination node remained, a massive bioship at the center of the swarm. It was the Queen, the heart of the Devourer hive mind. As long as it survived, the swarm would eventually reorganize and adapt. Dr. Hana worked frantically at her console. The Council had tried to fight the Queen ship before 8,000 years ago. They had failed. But she had an idea, something the ancient civilizations had never tried. She could overload a council shield generator, creating a spatial rift that would tear apart anything nearby. It would destroy the ship carrying the generator, but it might also destroy the Queen. Admiral Day listened to her plan. Then he looked around his bridge at his crew. They were exhausted, wounded, some barely alive. But when he explained what needed to be done, not one person hesitated. They all volunteered. "I am the Admiral," Day said. "This is my call to make." But before he could give the order, the youngest officer on the bridge spoke up. "Sir, with respect, the fleet needs you to coordinate the remaining ships. I can pilot a small craft to the Queen." "I volunteer." Admiral Day wanted to refuse. He had already lost too many good people. But the officer was right. The battle was not over. Someone had to lead the fleet and someone had to destroy the Queen. These were both necessary tasks. The officer took a small fighter, loaded with an overcharged shield generator. She flew directly at the Queen ship, dodging through desperate defensive fire. The Queen recognized the threat and tried to escape, but it was too large to move quickly. The fighter crashed into the Queen's hull. The shield generator overloaded. Space itself seemed to tear apart at that point, creating a wound in reality. The Queen ship was pulled into the rift and destroyed. When the rift collapsed, the entire Devourer swarm went silent. Without their Queen, the hive mind shattered. Individual bioships tried to flee, but they were no longer coordinated. They were easy targets. The combined fleet hunted them down one by one. By the end of the day, the Devourer threat was ended. The cost had been severe. Earth lost 34 ships and 12,000 crew members. The Council lost 120 ships, but the galaxy was saved. The threat that had been sealed away for 8,000 years was finally destroyed. 6 months later, Earth held a memorial service. Representatives from every Council species attended. Even the Vryn sent delegates, former enemies who now understood what humanity had sacrificed for the galaxy. High Arbiter Velshara gave a speech that was broadcast across every inhabited world. "For 10,000 years we believed war was obsolete. We thought violence was a sign of primitive thinking. Then we met humanity and they showed us a painful truth. Peace is not the absence of war. Peace is something worth fighting for," she continued, her crystalline voice filled with emotion. "We called humans barbaric for their history. We were wrong. They are not barbaric. They are survivors. And now because of them, so are we. The Council formally grants humanity full membership and creates a new position, military advisor to the Council. This position will be held by a human, now and always." Admiral Day accepted the position, though he announced his retirement from active combat. He was tired. He had seen too much death. But he would serve the Council by teaching other species what humanity had learned through centuries of conflict. Dr. Hana continued her research, now focused on studying the remains of the Devourer bioships. She wanted to understand them completely, to make sure nothing like them could threaten the galaxy again. Late at night, she sometimes wondered what other dangers lurked in dark space waiting to be discovered. Earth's status in the galaxy changed completely. Human military academies became famous. Officers from dozens of species came to Earth to learn human tactics. They studied battles from Earth's history, trying to understand what created warriors who fought without fear. What they learned surprised them. Humans were not fearless. They were terrified, just like everyone else. But they had learned something through their violent history. Being afraid did not mean you stopped. It meant you found what you were afraid to lose and fought for it anyway. One day, a young Council officer visited Admiral Day in his office. She was from a species that had never known war, never experienced true conflict. She asked him a question that many had asked before. How do humans fight so bravely? How do you face death without running away? Day looked out his window at Earth spinning below. He thought of all the people he had lost. Ambassador Sora, Pilot Quan, Captain Minho, the 40,000 civilians who died to save billions. All the names and faces that haunted his dreams. "We are not brave," he said quietly. "We are terrified every single time. But we learned something a long time ago. We learned it when we were fighting animals for survival on ancient Earth. We learned it again during our world wars, and we learned it once more fighting the Vryn and the Devourers." "What did you learn?" the officer asked. Day turned to face her. "That running away does not make the danger disappear. It just means you die tired. So when we fight to the end. Not because we want to, because we have no other choice. Earth's warships now patrolled the galaxy's borders. They had names that honored the fallen. The Perseverance, the Hope of Quan, the Promise of Sora. On every ship's hull, painted in 50 different languages, was a phrase that had become famous across the stars. We are humanity. If we are against you, run. If we are beside you, stand firm. If we are behind you, we have already won. The phrase was not a boast. It was a warning and a promise. The galaxy had learned what humans were capable of when they fought for survival. No species wanted to face that fury again, but every species was grateful that humanity fought on their side. Peace returned to the galaxy. Not the naive peace of 10,000 years ago, when the Council believed conflict was impossible. This was a harder peace, one protected by those willing to fight when necessary. And at the center of that protection stood humanity, the species that understood the true cost of freedom. Admiral Day often thought about the first day he met the Galactic Council. He remembered how they had judged humanity for its violent history. They had been afraid of what humans might do. In the end, they learned that their fear was justified, but they also learned that sometimes, the most 1,000 different ways by 1,000 different species. But the core message was always the same. No species truly,